Hey guys, so today we are going to talk about open questions in an interview. So let's get into it. Now, if you have ever forced to conduct an interview with a future colleague or a junior or anybody at all basically who you're trying to kind of figure out basically if they're a good fit for your company, you will probably have found the same sort of issues that I've found when I've been doing this. And you see, the fundamental problem is that you only have a certain amount of time to figure out whether or not somebody is a good fit for your company. I mean, if you think about it, it's such a tricky thing. It's the same type of problem you find where you're trying to kind of figure out basically you're trying to figure out the natural state of somebody, their common state, in a simulated environment. Because let's not forget that you will think of it this way. It's kind of the same thing when you put a camera in a room of people. It's actually funny because I've read about studies where this has actually been tested, where they would put a camera, and the camera, in one group they would tell the people in the room that the camera was on, and in another room they would say that it was off, and just observe the different behaviors and how it affected the people in the room. And the study actually showed that people will adjust their behavior if they think that they are being observed. It's the exact same phenomenon you have when, here I am out on the street, and if I were just standing here without my phone in my hand, I wouldn't be aware of that people are most likely watching me while I'm behaving in the way that I do. And we humans are affected quite a bit if we think that we are being observed. And I've been doing so many different interviews where my favorite one was where we told the candidate, it's just us, we're just gonna have a friendly chat between programmers, right? And I told my boss, you will never convince a candidate who calls in and wants to get a job that we're not having an interview right now, especially not when there's two of us and I'm asking very, very direct, or one of us was going to ask very direct, aimed, kind of targeted questions that was designed to figure out if the person was good at their job or not. And you see, the thing is that I've found that these sorts of interview situations where you ask very direct, specific questions about certain technical topics and so forth, it's not so effective it's effective to figure out if somebody has a certain type of knowledge, but it's not so effective to figure out if a person is smart or not. And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean that one of the biggest mistakes that people make, especially juniors, they make the mental mistake to think that the reason why a company is hiring them is because they have a fancy degree or that they have things on their CV. You see, the way that it goes, guys, is this. The CV and your education background, it's just an indicator as to whether or not you have a skill. The way that it works is that most of the time, that's just something that gets you in the door. Think about it, because when somebody first sees your CV or sees you, that's why I tell people, pay attention to your CV, because it's the first thing that anybody in the IT world or your future boss is going to see, which means that if that's good, you will get a lot of people contacting you. If it's bad, very few people will contact you. But that's another video. So that's just step one, because once you get in the door and you sit down, then the real thing happens. And that's just what people don't understand. If you're worried that for getting a job or if you want to work on your interview process skills, if you will, you should work on the interview itself. You should have a look at your own social skills, because once you're in the interview room, that's when the real challenge starts. You think, because coding skills and being able to prove that you can code, that's something that you will learn very quickly by just working a little bit. And that's usually where people get really nervous. But honestly, the coding skills that you have are secondary to your ability to effectively communicate that you are intelligent or that you are smart, because IT companies do not hire you because of your degree. They hire you because you can do things, because you're a smart person. As some companies, I can only speak for myself, the job I have today, I didn't even know the language when I started. Like, I did the code test with my boss next to me, and he had to kind of guide me through the syntax because I had never ever worked in Scala. I still got the job, but I didn't know the language. And the reason why I got the job was not because I had hardcore coding skills in exactly Scala. It was because of how well I did explaining and communicating the way that I thought about the problem and how we together solved the problem. That, together with my CV, made my boss realize that, hey, this is somebody we can use. So what I argue is and we kind of talked about this, me and my manager, and I've talked to other managers about it as well. The most effective way that I've found to figure out if somebody's a good fit for your company is to ask open questions. My favorite interviewing technique, and I used this myself when I was interviewing when I was looking for a job, I had my own interview questions. I asked people at the company these questions just to figure out how good they were at what they do. And I would ask them things such as, all right, what's your favorite tool and why? Could you just explain a little bit? What would you say is the most tricky part about keeping a software team together? What's the most challenging software that you've ever had to write, and how did you solve it, and why did you do it that way? These open questions where you can't be wrong. And the beauty of this is that anybody can sit and start talking about this. And if you are yourself someone who's been facing these sort of challenges, and you know what challenges we're talking about here, that if you just listen to the person talk and reason about the question, you will understand very quickly how good they are at what they do. That's at least from my experience. I mean, I could figure out in a matter of minutes how good my coworkers at my current job was by just asking a very open question. My favorite question, if my absolute favorite question, is to ask, especially for people who are hyping functional programming, which Scala, we were going to work in a company that uses Scala, so I assume that, all right, they're into functional. Let's see how they reason about this question. And I asked this question, so when would you say that it makes more sense to use object-oriented programming instead of functional programming? And just hearing them reason and talk and think about the problem or the question made me kind of realize, okay, this person there has this sort of skill or this depth of understanding and so forth. And yeah, so I would say that code tests and so forth are necessary to kind of gauge if somebody has hardcore coding skills. But the true in-depth understanding of an individual, you will get that from just asking an open question. And this is why I argue that it's vital that the people who conducting the interview are technical people themselves. And they have to have a certain amount of social graces as well, because otherwise that's going to color the interviewing process. If you have some lone wolf type of programmer who only cares about one very narrow set of, or has a very narrow mindset. But anywho, by applying this method to just have open questions, I actually found that I could very quickly pinpoint the really skilled programmers very quickly. I mean, it was the way that I structured my own interviews, and it's the way I structured the interviews at my previous job, and that's how I found basically one of the best programmers I've ever worked with. So that's my thoughts on this. When it comes to interviewing processes and so forth, I think we should start moving away from, I think the code test should still be there, but I think that it's more valuable to have a personal interview and ask a few open questions with a technical expert in the room and just listen to the person think. Because honestly, we're getting to the point where it's impossible for anybody to have on paper all the things that they need to know. So as far as I'm concerned, we're moving away from having something on paper to just hiring people that are truly intelligent. And you figure that out by asking these sorts of questions, at least in my opinion. Have a great day.